There has been a surge in fighting between Ukrainian government forces and pro-Russian rebels, with both sides pushing to make gains ahead of today's peace talks in Minsk. We spoke to Ambassador William Harrison Courtney, a Russia expert and senior fellow at the RAND Corporation, also in Washington.
Well, the Russians seem to be wanting to expand the area that they've controlled. They now have maybe 500 square kilometers additional beyond what was agreed in September in the ceasefire talks in Minsk. So it looks like they want to change the correlation of forces and now revise the ceasefire accord, partly because they want to gain control of a strategic rail hub at Debaltseve. The Ukrainian military forces have been fighting fairly courageously, but they're not well armed. And so after the September ceasefire accord in Minsk, the Russians and the rebels that they backed decided to continue the offensive because apparently the Ukrainians did not offer enough opposition from their perspective. And so it's not clear whether, if a new agreement is negotiated, whether that will be any more stable than the one agreed in September, because the mismatch of forces between Russia and Ukraine will still be as great as it was then. Why is Vladimir Putin pushing so hard in the eastern Donbass? Well, in Crimea, they had an incentive because the Russian Black Sea Fleet is based there, and Russia was always uneasy with a lease arrangement with Ukraine. They took Crimea in a bloodless seizure early last year, and that seemed to give the Kremlin some feeling of being emboldened, and so they decided to go after the eastern Donbass, an area which has industrial activity, which is important to Russia. But at that point, they didn't have strategic surprise. So they've taken quite a few casualties there, and they're still taking more casualties. It's not clear how far they want to go. That's the big uncertainty. Earlier, Vladimir Putin talked about Novorossiya, an area that would go all the way down to Odessa, and including Odessa, as being part of sort of Russia in a natural sense. Some have argued in Russia that maybe something less than that, but a land bridge from the eastern Ukraine all the way down to Crimea would be important to be able to support Crimea. It's a little bit unclear now how far they want to go. Where they are right now is they're about to completely encircle Debaltseve, this railhead on the northern edge of the Azov Sea. But the next logical target would be to take on Mariupol. Mariupol is a city 10 times the size of Debaltseve. If they decided to go after Mariupol, it would be a huge, bloody assault. And I think the Russians probably are thinking very hard whether they want to run the risks of doing that. Up to now, the Kremlin has been telling its own people that the Russian forces are not fighting in Ukraine. If they mount an assault on Mariupol, which is so large, it will be hard for the Kremlin to maintain that fiction in Russia.